All right, we're going to get started. So thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for the webinar about the Washington Center's application. So my name is Taylor, and I am a senior admissions counselor at the Washington Center. Today, I'm specifically going to be talking about the application for the Washington Center's academic internship program. And we're going to be looking at the application documents and written materials that you'll need before you can submit your application. If you do have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to enter them in the Q&A option in the webinar. If you have any technical issues or for some reason you can't hear me, something goes wrong with my presentation, please feel free to put that in the chat. But for the most part, we're just going to use the Q&A feature for the application related questions, and I will be sure to get to them at the end of the presentation. All right, so we're just going to jump in with a brief overview of the 5 materials that you need in addition to the rest of the online portion of the application. So once you've created an application, and you can do this on our website, there should be a banner that says apply here at the top, or you can go to twc.edu/apply. Once you've started an application, you'll be able to fill out your contact information, a little bit of information about your degree history, GPA, and then we'll ask for these 5 additional documents and written materials that you'll need to upload before you can submit. So those will be the 1-page resume, the statement of professional interest, and that's approximately 100 words, the issues essay, which is about 500 words, an official transcript, and a letter of recommendation. So I'll go a little more in depth for each of these materials, but this is just an overview of the 5 materials that you'll need to submit your application to the Washington Center. So the resume. What is the purpose of your resume, you might say? So the goal of the resume is to outline your educational background, any honors or recognitions that you have, work experience, activities, and any skills that you have that would be beneficial for your internship experience. There is some recommended content that we do suggest that you include as part of your resume. Everyone's resume looks a little bit different. Some people might have a little bit more experience, professional experience or work experience. If you're an undergraduate student, you might want to lean a little bit more on leadership experience or volunteer experience. So everyone's resume will look a little bit different, but we do think it's very important that you follow recommended content guidelines, and I'm going to go over those. So of the recommended content, we have your contact information, which should be your resume's header. This should be pretty large. Your name should be the largest item on the page. A good reminder to use a professional email address. Make sure that when you are sending this resume out to any potential employers, or in this example, to the Washington Center, you want to make sure that your email is professional. If possible, using your school one is always recommended. But something like, first name, last name, a number. We don't want to make sure that you're using a email from middle school or something that might not be appropriate for a work environment. So make sure it's professional. You don't need to include your address, your home address and your school address. I know sometimes that can be a little bit confusing, but the most important part is using your phone number and your email and making sure, again, that that's the largest information on the page. So for education, you'll put your home institution first, and then the month and year you'll be graduating or have graduated. This is a good place to also include any academic honors or awards. So you can list them in the education section if they are school related. And for example, if you're including something like the Dean's List, you should include how long you've held that honor. So if you've been on the Dean's List, for example, for 2 or 3 semesters, you should include that as part of that line on your resume. You can highlight scholarships as well, but you shouldn't include the monetary value of any award on your resume. So work experience is going to be one of the larger components of the resume, also known as professional experience. So you should list your experience in reverse chronological order. So the most recent experience should be first. You should shoot for 3 to 5 bullet points per position, and make sure that you're using present tense for current duties and past tense for past duties. Leadership experience, also known, or you can call it this on your resume, community leadership, campus leadership, volunteer experience, if that's also applicable to the leadership component, would be one of the next larger components of your resume. Again, you're going to want to follow the same rule for work experience, and that's listing your experience in reverse chronological order. So the most recent information should be first. You're also going to list 3 to 5 bullet points for each of those positions. And again, use present tense for current duties and past tense for any past duties. So the skills section is a great place to include some additional skills that may not have been mentioned in your work experience, the leadership experience, or the education sections. But you can include, for example, any computer skills or any language ability. Make sure that you're giving concrete examples, and if you are including language ability on your resume, make sure you're describing the language proficiency with words like basic, intermediate, conversational, fluent, etc. So that's what the resume is supposed to cover in terms of content. The formatting of your resume is almost as important, or just as important really, because it really helps to tie all the information together in a way that is really pleasing to the eye and easy for people to read and understand exactly what you're trying to convey to them. So good rules of thumb to follow are keeping your resume to 1 page. If you have a couple of lines on the second page, you can go back through your resume and try to change the formatting, change the margins, or you might just have to remove a couple of bullet points from one of your sections. It's really important that it fits on 1 page because no one likes a couple of lines or a short paragraph on the second page when it could be condensed just to that one. It's a good idea to keep your margins between 0.5 and 1 inch. So that's a good idea because you don't want words printed to the very edge of the page. You also want to make sure that you're using as much space on the paper as possible. So you can make your margins a little bit smaller if you need to squeeze in a couple extra lines on that resume, but also keep in mind that this is something that you're going to share with a potential employer internship site, and you want to make sure that it looks professional. So keeping those margins the same on all sides of the paper, and then also a reasonable size. You should also use a 10 to 12 point font for the body of your resume. Like I mentioned, the contact information, your header should be a little bit bigger so your name can be larger than 10 to 12 point font, but the rest of it should be pretty consistent with using 10 to 12 points. You should not include any photos of yourself on your resume. The contact information is enough with your name, email, and phone number, and you should try to avoid the photos. You should also be consistent in how you're formatting the locations and time periods. So like we mentioned, that reverse chronological order, make sure you're doing that for all of the sections, and make sure that if you have a location and then a date, you're doing that the same way in all of your sections. So you want it to look very uniform throughout in the education, work experience, volunteer experience, community experience, however many sections you have, you want to make sure that all of that location and time period is very consistent. So now we can just look at a resume example and see kind of what this looks like, keeping our guidelines in mind. So we have John Smith here, who has made his name the largest point font of the resume at the top. He has an email, a phone number, professional email, which is great. The first section up top is the education section. So we have the home institution, major, minor, GPA, and then relevant coursework. If you feel like you don't have a lot of experience, it's always a great way to add in some relevant coursework so that your employer or whoever you're sharing this resume with can see that while you might not have work experience, you do have some coursework experience. And as an undergraduate student, that's also really important. So he has the honors section beneath the education section, which is fine, but if you want, you can combine those two. And then we have experience, which is going to be that work or professional experience. Again, both of those jobs are to the present, but you can see on the right-hand side that we have the time, for example, January 2010 to present, and then September 2011 to present is very consistent all the way down the page. The margins look really great all the way down the page. And the font might be a little small to see, but you can look in the experience section, and for the present positions, we're going to be using present tense. So the first line under that first experience says work 18 hours each week. So that's great that we're using the present. If we move down to a past position, like the second position under leadership and service experience, we're going to see that he says aided up to 8 nurses in a 48-bed unit, which is great because we're using the past tense to describe positions that were held but aren't currently being held. And then we can see at the bottom, he does have a skills section and lists computer, and then is a little bit more specific with Microsoft Office, Publisher, Excel, Word, PowerPoint, and then a couple of other programs. So that's the resume. We can move on to the statement of professional interest now. So what is the statement of professional interest exactly? It is supposed to be a snapshot of you and your career interests. So what's included in this statement? Because it is supposed to be pretty brief, it's only supposed to be about 100 words, but it should include your interests, your internship goals, any future professional goals, and skills you were hoping to gain and or utilize through the experience with the Washington Center. Because it's really brief and it's going to be shared with our internship site partners, you should avoid naming specific organizations, as this statement, like I said, will be sent out to multiple organizations. So you don't want to limit yourself in any way, so avoid naming specific organizations and try to keep it as brief as possible while still explaining what you're interested in, what draws you to this program, what you're looking to get out of it. So we can look at an example, which will probably be helpful. So here's an example of the statement of professional interest. It says, through my internship, I want to gain hands-on experience and be involved with the justice process. After graduating with a degree in criminal justice, I have aspirations of attending law school as well as working in law enforcement. I want to grow as a law enforcement professional and develop relationships that will help me have a career in the justice field. My interests in law enforcement lie within investigating public service and white-collar crime. I also want to gain a better understanding of the justice system as a whole. Okay, so if we break down the different parts of this, the statement is still pretty brief. It's still following that 100-word guideline, but it does tell us what the student is hoping to gain from their experience with the Washington Center. So we're hearing about their specific interests within law enforcement, and they mention those to be investigation, public service, and white-collar crime. We hear about their future professional goals, attending law school and working in law enforcement. And then we hear about their specific goals for the internship, to develop relationships, gain a better understanding of the criminal justice system. So this is an effective statement because it's balancing this student's broader interests in criminal justice, specifically their future professional goals, with their specific area of focus and what they want to do in the program. So the goal for this is just to give you, or is to give us, a brief overview of what you're looking for so that we can make sure that we're delivering on this experience and connecting you with those internships that are going to provide you with those goals that you want for the program. So the issues essay is the third written material that's required for the application, and it's meant to serve mostly as our writing sample component of your application. So what you'll do for the issues essay is that you'll pick an issue that you're concerned about, passionate about, or knowledgeable of in your field of choice or your major, and discuss it in about 500 words. So you're going to reflect on a key issue related, like I said, to either your major or your professional field of interest. If you want an internship in an area that isn't your major, that's completely fine, but it's a good idea to pick an issue from whatever field you're looking to get an internship with. It's a good way to connect with the internship site supervisors as they review your application materials. And it's a good way for us to see your communication ability and your writing skills, like I mentioned. So remember that while you're writing this issues essay, your audience is going to be those potential internship sites along with the Washington Center. So again, try not to mention specific agencies or be too specific with the agencies that you mentioned to limit yourself in any way. So the issues essay, like I said, should be 500 words. We can be a little bit flexible with that, but only really about 50 words over or under. So it's your 500-word writing sample. And we always recommend that if there is a class that you've recently taken that you learned something interesting, you wanted to kind of investigate that a little more, it's great to take topics or conversations from your current classes and then be able to translate that information into this issues essay, which will be used in your application and internship matching process. So the transcript, you can submit your online application to the Washington Center without your transcript, but it must be received by us before we can review your application. So you have two options for getting your transcript to us. You can either upload it directly into your application by yourself, or you can request that it be sent to the Washington Center directly, and you'll send it to that email address that's info@twc.edu. If you do upload it yourself, you can order it, scan it, and then upload it to the application as an attachment. And then if you do want to request that it be sent, you can usually do that through the registrar's office or usually through an online student portal with your university. So the last component or the last outside material or component of the application are the letters of recommendation. So every student is required to have a letter of recommendation from a faculty member or a professional supervisor. So it can be professional or academic in nature. If you have a GPA that is below 2.75, you will need 2 letters of recommendation. The way the letters of recommendation tab of the application works is you'll go into your application once you've asked your professor or your supervisor if they're willing to write a letter for you. Once you've confirmed with them that they are, you will enter their name and email into the application. They will be sent a link in their email that they'll use to upload the letter themselves. So once you've entered in their contact information and saved it in your application, you're done with that section of the application. Your recommender themselves will be able to upload the letter. So as soon as you have confirmed that they'll write it, that they've received the email with that, you're completely done with that component of the application, other than reminding them to submit it around our deadline times. All right, so this concludes my part of the presentation, but I am excited to see if there are any questions for anyone who submitted those. I will be answering those now. Feel free, if someone else asks a question that you want me to clarify, feel free to, like I said, add it in the Q&A function of the webinar. All right, so the deadline to apply is, I'm assuming that we're talking about the spring 2021 application, and if so, our early deadline is coming up later this week on October 7th, and the regular deadline is November 4th, and that is for the spring 2021 semester. All right, so Christine asked, when you say most recent for the resume, say the time period is both listed as present, would you list the position you entered first? Yes, Christine. So if there are 2 positions that you're currently holding, say you started one in January, you started one in March, but you're still holding them now, the most recent one I would say would be the March to present position. So that should be at the top of the experience section. And then beneath that would be the one January through present, for example. Okay, and it looks like Karina added something into the chat. So she asked when the deadlines are for the summer applications. So the summer applications, the early deadline is February 17th, and the regular deadline is March 17th. Right, so we have another question about the deadlines for fall. So the fall deadlines have been set as well. The deadline for, the early deadline for fall is April 7th, and then the regular deadline is May 5th. So all of that information can be found on our academic internship program page on our website. There's a section called dates and deadlines, and it has the program dates, the start date, and then the end date of the internship. And then it also has all of the application dates and deadlines as well. All right, so we have another question that is, how many students typically apply versus how many students are accepted? So if you meet the Washington Center's eligibility requirements, That's GPA, sophomore standing. If you are approved by your home institution, now some institutions may have other additional eligibility requirements. They may require you have a certain GPA, like above a 3.0. They may require that you are in good standing with your university, and they may have an internal process. So as long as you meet our eligibility requirements to the Washington Center, you're approved by your home institution, and then you submit an application with all of the required materials, you should expect to be accepted into the program. That being said, there are some internship sites that have higher GPA requirements that look for more competitive candidates. Those specific sites do vary a bit depending on what your major is, and are something that you can discuss with your advisor in the internship matching process. But you should expect to be accepted as long as you meet those other requirements. We want as many students as possible to be able to participate in the program. So while some internship sites may be a little bit more selective and those may be more competitive, overall, you should, again, if you meet those other requirements, expect to be accepted into the program. All right, well, it looks like I've answered everyone's questions for now. But if you do have any other questions that come up as you're working on your application, or really anything else, if you're preparing for TWC in future semesters and you have any question about our programs or application process, please feel free to reach out to your admissions counselor if you already know them or have been connected to them, or you can email info@twc.edu if you're not sure who your admissions counselor is. You can also check out this page on our website, twc.edu/applying. It does have explanations of all of the application components, like the issues essay, resume, and statement. There are examples and samples of all of those three, as well as just a checklist to your application material. So those can be really useful as you work on that application. And then if you have any questions, again, about those resources or anything else, please feel free to reach out to someone at the Washington Center, and we would be happy to help you. All right, thank you so much for joining, and I hope the rest of you have a great day.